A mafia boss saw what the entire world chose to ignore. Inside a small diner in Chicago's South Side, two deaf little girls were desperately begging for help. But no one noticed them. No one listened. No one cared. Waiters walked past. Customers kept laughing and talking. The manager stayed focused on his register. It was as if the girls didn't even exist, until Vincent Russo stepped forward, a man everyone feared, yet the only one who understood what those trembling hands were trying to say. In the dim, cold glow of flickering fluorescent lights, Lily Russo sat shaking, signing with desperate urgency. Please, help. She wasn't waving. She wasn't crying out loud. She was asking for help in a language the world refused to see. And somehow, in a room full of people, only one man noticed. Vincent Russo. In that moment, something shifted. Because what he did next was not just a simple act of kindness. It set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. Buried secrets would begin to surface. Dangerous confrontations would follow. And a truth powerful enough to destroy everything would slowly come into the light. Because when a man like Vincent Russo decides to step in, it is never just kindness. It is the beginning of a storm. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in? And what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. In the heart of Chicago's South Side, on a raw October evening in 2025, the wind howled down cracked sidewalks like an angry ghost that refused to leave. The temperature had dropped sharply after sunset, carrying the sharp bite of approaching winter. Neon signs flickered weakly above storefronts with barred windows, and the air smelled of diesel exhaust, fried food, and damp concrete. Inside Louie's Diner, a classic greasy spoon holdout with chipped formica counters, faded red vinyl booths patched with duct tape, and a long counter lined with spinning stools, the dinner rush had settled into its usual tired rhythm. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on grease-stained menus and half-empty coffee cups. The jukebox in the corner played an old Motown song too softly to cut through the clatter of plates and low murmurs of conversation. Steam rose from the grill where the cook flipped burgers and scrambled eggs for the night owls. At a small booth near the back, two young girls sat huddled together. Lily Russo was 10 years old with curly brown hair that needed a trim and wide expressive eyes that spoke even when her hands did not. She was deaf-born that way, and had learned early that the world often moved too fast to notice her. Beside her sat her best friend Sophie Martinez, 11, also deaf-thin as a rail with dark hair pulled into uneven braids and a persistent cough that rattled her small frame. Both girls wore threadbare jackets that were too light for the season. Their clothes hung loosely on malnourished frames. Dark circles shadowed their eyes from too many nights of broken sleep in a cramped, heatless apartment. Their mother, Elena Ellie Harper, a 34-year-old single mother, was not with them. She was out driving her Chicago Public Schools bus on a double shift, trying desperately to cover rent, utilities, and the mounting medical bills for Sophie's recurring illnesses. Ellie worked exhausting hours, her hands calloused from gripping the oversized steering wheel, her back aching from the constant vibration of the old yellow bus. Yet no matter how many routes she covered, the money never stretched far enough. Eviction notices had already been taped to their door twice that year. Tonight, the girls had been sent to the diner with a few crumpled dollar bills and strict instructions to make them last. They had ordered the cheapest item, 2 small glasses of water with extra ice, and nothing more. Lily's hands moved frantically in the air, signing with sharp, desperate motions only Sophie could fully understand. "Water, please. Sophie is hot. Medicine. Help." Her fingers trembled. Sophie leaned against the booth, cheeks flushed with fever, breathing shallow. No one in the diner looked their way. A tired waitress hurried past with a tray of burgers, eyes glazed from a 12-hour shift. 2 construction workers at the counter laughed loudly over their coffee, never glancing at the corner. The manager stood behind the register, counting receipts, his face set in the hard lines of someone who had seen too much hardship to notice one more. The girls were invisible. 2 small deaf children from the poorest blocks of the South Side sitting in plain sight while the world looked right past them. In the far corner booth, partially hidden by a tall partition, sat Vincent Russo. At 42, he was a fair-skinned American man of Italian-Irish descent. broad-shouldered and impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal overcoat that cost more than most people in this neighborhood earned in a month. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and his steel blue eyes carried the weight of a man who commanded respect and fear across Chicago's construction sites, real estate deals, and the quieter corridors of power. Vinny Russo was a mafia boss who had built a successful empire through legitimate fronts in commercial construction and property development. Yet success had come at a brutal cost. The violent world he navigated had hollowed him out, leaving behind gnawing guilt and consuming remorse that surfaced in the quiet hours. Tonight, Vinny had come to the South Side not for pleasure but for business scouting territory, ahead of a tense meeting with a rival faction that wanted to muscle into his territory. He sat alone, a half-eaten plate of meatloaf growing cold in front of him, his mind churning with calculations and old regrets. The laughter of his late wife still echoed in his memory on nights like this, along with the painful knowledge that his choices had kept him from being the father he might have been. A deep, violent emotional conflict raged inside him, the ruthless man who had to maintain control versus the hollow ache of a life built on isolation and loss. His gaze drifted across the diner and caught on the small movements in the back booth. Small hands cutting through the air with urgent, broken rhythm. A child signing. Begging. No one else noticed. Something sharp twisted in Vinny's chest, a sudden, fierce pang of recognition. He remembered his wife teaching him a few basic signs years ago, back when they dreamed of a different life. Those gestures had long been buried under layers of hardened survival. Lily signed again, slower this time. Her small shoulders hunched inward as though trying to disappear. Please. Water. Help. Her eyes darted around the room wide with fear and exhaustion. Sophie's head rested on the table now, her breathing labored. Vinny's hand tightened around his coffee mug until his knuckles whitened. A storm of inner turmoil surged through him. Why should he care? This was not his world. These children were not his responsibility. Yet the sight of them, so small, so overlooked, so utterly powerless, struck something buried deep. Guilt clawed at him, remorse for every time he had looked away from suffering to protect his empire. A violent emotional conflict tore at his heart. The cold calculation of a man who survived by staying detached versus an overwhelming, unexpected surge of compassion that felt almost like love, not romantic but fierce, protective, paternal. From the very first moment, an intense, passionate instinct flooded him. This child needed to be seen, needed to be protected. He stood before his mind could talk him out of it. The movement was quiet but deliberate. Vinny crossed the diner with measured steps, his expensive leather shoes silent on the checkered floor. He stopped at the server station, picked up a fresh glass, filled it with ice water from the dispenser, and added a small side of crackers from the counter. Simple, everyday items that cost almost nothing, yet felt like a lifeline in this moment. When he reached the booth, Lily looked up, startled. Her eyes widened in disbelief, as if she were not sure he was real. Vinny lowered himself slightly, trying to meet her at eye level without looming. He set the glass down gently, and with hesitant but clear movements signed back the few words he remembered. Are you okay? The transformation on Lily's face was instant and heartbreaking. Relief washed over her delicate features. Someone had finally seen her. Someone had heard. Her small hands trembled as she signed back. Thank you. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she held them back with the practiced resilience of a child who had learned too early that crying changed nothing. Sophie lifted her head, weakly, confusion and guarded fear flickering across her face. She signed quickly to Lily, her motions sharp with suspicion. Who is he? Don't trust. Vinny's chest tightened. He felt the weight of their poverty in every detail, the thin jackets, the hollow cheeks, the way they clutched the single glass of water as though it were gold. Ellie Harper's absence hung heavy in the air. He knew without being told the kind of desperate, humiliating struggle that forced a mother to leave her children alone in a place like this. The stark gap between his world of tailored suits, heated luxury cars, and private meetings, and their reality of cold nights, empty cupboards, and powerless endurance struck him like a physical blow. Before he could speak, the diner door burst open with a gust of icy wind. 3 rough-looking men stepped inside, members of a rival crew testing boundaries. Their eyes scanned the room and locked on Vinny. Tension crackled instantly. One of them smirked, voice low but carrying. Russo. Thought we told you this block was off limits. Vinny straightened his posture, shifting into quiet command. Inner conflict raged hotter now, the urge to protect these children clashing violently with the need to maintain his reputation. He could not show weakness. Yet walking away from Lily and Sophie felt impossible. The unfairness of it all burned 2 innocent girls caught between adult wars they could never understand. He signed quickly to Lily, keeping his hands small and calm. Stay here. "It is okay." Then he turned toward the men, voice low and controlled. "Not tonight. Not here." The confrontation remained tense, but contained sharp words, exchanged shoulders squared, a brief standoff that sent a ripple of unease through the diner. No fists flew, but the threat hung thick. The rivals eventually backed off with muttered warnings, shooting dark glances at the corner booth as they left. Vinny exhaled slowly, the gnawing guilt inside him deepening. How many times had his world brought danger to the innocent? He returned to the girls. Lily watched him with a mix of fear, confusion, and budding curiosity. Her small voice, when she finally spoke aloud in a soft, timid whisper appropriate for addressing someone older and powerful, trembled. "Thank you, sir." "Sophie, she is sick." Vinny nodded, his heart twisting with an overwhelming surge of protective love, paternal, fierce, and absolute from that very first extended moment. He wanted nothing more than to shield this child from every hardship life had already thrown at her. Yet the emotional conflict tore at him. A powerful man suddenly confronted with his own past failures, his remorse for the family he had never been able to build, and the terrifying responsibility now staring back at him through a 10-year-old's hopeful eyes. Outside, the wind howled louder. Inside the diner, a fragile stillness settled around the booth. Lily's hand signed again, slower, more trusting. "You see us." Vinny felt something crack open inside his chest. A violent emotional storm of guilt, remorse, and newfound purpose. He had come here for territory. Instead, he had found a child who needed a father. And in that quiet, condensed moment of stillness, amid the clatter of plates and the distant hum of the city, Vincent Russo made a silent vow. He would not look away. The night was far from over. Ellie Harper's bus would eventually bring her back to this diner to collect her daughters. But for now, in the warm glow of fluorescent lights and the cold reality of Southside poverty, one small act of kindness had already begun to change everything. The next morning dawned cold and gray over Chicago's South Side, the kind of October 2025 day where the wind cut through thin coats like invisible knives. Elena Harper stepped off her school bus after another double shift, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion that went far deeper than tired muscles. At 34, Ellie was a woman worn thin by endless struggle. Her face, once bright with quiet hope, now carried the hollow look of someone who had learned that hope was a luxury she could rarely afford. She was desperately poor, her body malnourished from too many meals skipped so her daughters could eat. Dark circles ringed her eyes from nights spent shivering in their cramped apartment where the heat had been shut off for non-payment. The wind had howled through cracks in the windows for weeks, leaving her fingers numb and her spirit bruised. She hurried toward Louie's diner, anxiety tightening her chest. Lily and Sophie should have been waiting there since last night. Every unreasonable injustice of her life pressed down on her, the landlord's latest threat of eviction. The school district cutting overtime, pay the medical clinic that had turned Sophie away because the bill from last month remained unpaid. Ellie felt powerless, a single mother stripped bare by a system that seemed designed to keep people like her drowning. Her steps faltered as dizziness washed over her. The world tilted for a moment, numbness spreading through her limbs from lack of sleep and food. She caught herself on a lamppost, breathing shallow horror rising at the thought of what might have happened to her girls overnight. Inside the diner, the morning crowd was sparse. The same buzzing fluorescent lights illuminated the same patched booths. Lily and Sophie sat in the corner, looking even smaller in daylight. Lily's curly hair was tangled, her thin frame swallowed by the oversized jacket. Sophie's fever had broken slightly, but her cough still rattled like dry leaves in the wind. They had made the few dollars last by sharing one small order of toast, but their eyes lit up the moment Ellie walked in. "Mom," Lily signed quickly, her hands moving with a mix of relief and lingering fear. Ellie knelt, pulling both girls into a tight embrace, her voice soft and trembling when she spoke aloud. "I am so sorry, my loves. Mommy is here now." But before she could gather them to leave, the diner door opened again. Vincent Russo stepped inside, the wealthy and powerful mafia boss, cutting an imposing figure even in casual daylight. His fair skin glowed with the quiet confidence of a man who never worried about the next meal or the next rent payment. He wore a tailored wool coat over a crisp shirt, the kind of clothing that spoke of private tailors and heated offices high above the city. His steel blue eyes scanned the room and immediately found the corner booth. The sight of Ellie, thin, exhausted, yet fiercely protective of her daughters, sent a fresh wave of violent emotional conflict surging through his heart. From the moment he had helped Lily the night before, an overwhelming surge of paternal love had ignited inside Vinny, passionate and intense, burning like a flame he could not extinguish. It was not romantic. It was deeper, a fierce protective instinct that felt like fatherhood denied for too long. Yet it clashed violently with the gnawing remorse that had haunted him for years. He had built an empire through construction empires and real estate holdings that generated millions, but success had cost him the family he once dreamed of. Every time he looked at Lily, guilt tore at him, the child who reminded him of everything he had sacrificed to stay powerful. The inner torment grew sharper now, a violent tearing in his chest as he approached the booth. How could a man like him, stained by the shadows of his world, suddenly feel such burning attachment to a destitute family he barely knew? Ellie noticed him immediately. Her body tensed with guarded fear and confusion. This was the man Lily had described with excited signs last night, the stranger who had seen them when no one else would. She stood slowly, her voice coming out timid and polite, appropriate for addressing someone older and clearly powerful. "Sir, thank you for helping my daughters last night. I am Elena Harper. I work the bus routes." Vinny nodded, his voice low and measured. "Vincent Russo. I wanted to make sure they were all right." His eyes lingered on Ellie's thin frame, the way her coat hung loosely on malnourished shoulders, the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. The disparity between his world and hers struck him like a physical blow. While he drove a heated luxury sedan and slept in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, she endured cold, wind-filled nights in an apartment that barely kept out the Chicago winter. The injustice of it fueled his inner conflict remorse. For every time his own choices had contributed, however indirectly, to a city where mothers like Ellie had to break themselves just to survive. Lily's hands moved excitedly. "He signed back, Mom. He saw me." Sophie, however, remained guarded, her eyes narrowed with deep distrust. She signed quickly to Lily, motions sharp. "Powerful men bring trouble. We should not trust him." The quiet, emotional stillness that followed was heavy. Ellie felt a confusing mix of gratitude and anxiety. Part of her wanted to pull her daughters away and disappear back into the anonymity of poverty. Another part, the desperate, powerless part, felt a flicker of curiosity and overwhelming attachment beginning to form. Someone powerful had noticed them. Someone had helped without being asked. The idea both terrified and disoriented her. Dizziness returned. She gripped the edge of the table. Numbness, spreading as shock, rippled through her. How could a man like this care about people like them? Vinny sensed her turmoil. He spoke gently. "I would like to help, perhaps with a proper meal for the girls. Or transportation home." Before Ellie could respond, the diner door swung open again with unexpected force. 3 men from a rival faction stepped inside the same crew that had confronted Vinny the night before. Their leader, a stocky man with cold eyes, spotted Vinny and smirked. The tension escalated instantly. "Russo, you think you can just walk into our blocks and play hero? This South Side stretch is contested. You keep showing up and things get complicated." Vinny's posture shifted, calm but commanding. Inner torment raged hotter inside him. The violent conflict between his need to protect Ellie and the girls versus the demands of maintaining his empire tore at him with brutal force. He could not show weakness, yet walking away from this family now felt like abandoning something precious. "This is not the place," he said evenly. "Take it outside." The confrontation spilled onto the sidewalk in a tense, bold standoff. Words were exchanged sharply under the gray October sky. The rivals pressed, voices rising, accusing Vinny of overstepping territory. No blows were thrown, but the air crackled with threat. Vinny stood firm, his expensive coat whipping in the wind, while inside his chest remorse burned. Every moment of danger he brought near these vulnerable children deepened his guilt. He had come back to check on them, and now his world was already casting shadows over their fragile lives. Ellie watched from the diner window, horror rising in her throat. She pulled Lily and Sophie closer, her body trembling. Fear gripped her, fear for her daughters. Fear of the powerful man who seemed to attract danger, and a confusing surge of curiosity about why he kept returning. The absurdity of the situation stung a destitute mother who could barely feed her children, suddenly standing near a man whose wealth could solve every problem she faced, yet whose presence brought new risks. Tears pricked her eyes as numbness settled over her. She felt disoriented balance wavering the inner world, tearing violently between gratitude and terror. When the rivals finally backed off with muttered warnings and dark glances, Vinny returned inside. His face showed the strain of the encounter, but his eyes softened when they landed on the small family. Lily signed to him with growing trust. "You came back." Sophie still watched warily, creating silent tension. Vinny sat across from them, his presence filling the booth with quiet power. He ordered a full breakfast for the girls, and Ellie pancakes, eggs, fresh fruit, hot chocolate, items that cost little to him but represented abundance they had not seen in months. As they ate, Ellie's voice remained soft and timid. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Russo? People like us, We are not used to kindness from someone like you. Her words struck Vinny like a knife. Remorse clawed deeper, a violent emotional storm raging within. He had spent years building wealth through shrewd deals and calculated risks. Yet here was a woman enduring humiliating poverty, thin, sleep-deprived, surviving on sheer will while he possessed resources that could lift her burden in an instant. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned even hotter, passionate, and protective, making the inner conflict almost unbearable. He wanted to shield them to become the father figure Lily so clearly needed, yet he knew his world was dangerous. The guilt of possibly bringing harm tormented him relentlessly. Ellie felt the shift inside herself from deep suspicion to an overwhelming burning attachment. This powerful man saw her daughters when the world ignored them. He returned despite the risks. Confusion and curiosity warred with fear, creating a numbing disorientation that left her dizzy and emotionally raw. She was once desperately poor, and now a wealthy stranger offered protection that felt both like salvation and a terrifying unknown. In the quiet stillness that followed the meal, Lily reached across the table and touched Vinny's hand, lightly signing, "Thank you for seeing us." Sophie remained guarded, but her eyes held a flicker of reluctant curiosity. Vinny looked at Ellie, his voice low with the weight of his inner turmoil. "I will make sure you get home safely today. No one should have to face this alone." Outside, another rival car cruised slowly past the diner windows, tinted a silent reminder that the tensions on these streets were far from over. Ellie's heart pounded with anxiety, yet somewhere beneath the fear, a fragile trust was beginning to take root. The wind continued to howl through the south side streets, carrying away the echoes of confrontation. But inside the diner, a new chapter had quietly begun, one where a powerful man's remorse-driven protection collided with a destitute mother's desperate hope, tearing at both their hearts in ways neither could yet fully understand. Later that same gray October afternoon in 2025, the wind across Chicago's south side had sharpened, carrying the first real bite of the coming winter. Elena Harper guided her old yellow school bus through the familiar routes, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly that her knuckles ached. The bus rattled over potholed streets, the heater struggling against the cold drafts that seeped through aging seals. Ellie was bone-tired, her thin frame even more fragile after another long shift, with little more than coffee and a half-eaten sandwich to sustain her. Malnourished and sleep-deprived, she had spent too many recent nights huddled with Lily and Sophie under thin blankets, while the wind whistled through cracks in their apartment walls. The humiliation of poverty pressed on her constantly, the food pantry lines that stretched for blocks. The landlord's latest eviction warning slipped under the door. The school nurse's concerned look when Sophie's cough worsened, and there was no money for the prescribed medicine. When her shift finally ended, Ellie stepped off the bus into the biting air, dizziness washing over her again. The world tilted for a moment, numbness spreading through her legs as anxiety clawed at her chest. She made her way toward the small apartment building, fearing what fresh injustice awaited. Inside the dim hallway, another notice was taped to their door, this time from the utility company, threatening to shut off power if the overdue bill was not paid by the end of the week. Ellie's shoulders slumped. She felt powerless, a destitute mother stripped of every safety net, enduring one absurdly unfair blow after another, while trying to shield her daughters from the worst of it. Lily and Sophie were waiting inside the sparsely furnished room, the space barely warmed by a small space heater that flickered uncertainly. Lily's curly hair framed her hopeful face as she signed eagerly about the man from the diner. Sophie sat quietly, still guarded her small frame wrapped in layers of mismatched clothing. Ellie knelt, pulling them close, her voice soft and timid when she spoke. "We must be careful, my loves. Kindness from strangers can be dangerous." But Vincent Russo had not disappeared. True to his word, his sleek black luxury sedan heated seats and all pulled up outside the building later that evening. Vinny stepped out, his fair-skinned face set with quiet determination, the expensive wool coat and polished shoes marking the vast gulf between his world and theirs. He had spent the hours since leaving the diner in violent inner torment. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned hotter than ever, passionate, protective, and fierce from the very first moment he had seen her signing desperately in that booth. It was a father's instinct, raw and overwhelming, clashing violently with the gnawing remorse that had haunted him for years. He had built a powerful empire through construction companies and real estate developments that brought in millions living in comfort, while children like Lily and Sophie shivered in the cold. Every memory of his late wife and the family he had never fully been there for tore at him now. How could a man stained by the shadows of his mafia dealings suddenly feel such burning attachment to this impoverished family? The conflict raged inside him, a violent emotional storm that left him restless and heavy with guilt. He knocked gently. When Ellie opened the door, Confusion and fear flickered across her face. She stepped back slightly, her voice coming out polite and hesitant. "Mr. Russo, I did not expect you here." Vinny's steel-blue eyes softened as he looked past her to the two girls. "I wanted to ensure you made it home safely. And I had some questions. About your situation." Ellie invited him inside, reluctantly, the stark contrast hitting like a physical blow. Her apartment was pitiful peeling paint, a sagging couch salvaged from the street bare cupboards, and the faint smell of dampness from nights when the wind howled unchecked. Vinny's presence filled the small space with the quiet intensity of his wealth and power. He sat carefully, his expensive coat draped over the back of a rickety chair, while Ellie remained standing, thin arms wrapped around herself. As they spoke, Vinny began asking gentle but probing questions about her work as a school bus driver, about the girls' needs, and why no one seemed to help a family clearly struggling. Ellie's answers came softly, at first guarded, but the weight of her misery soon spilled out in quiet, heartbreaking detail. The double shifts, the unpaid bills, the nights when the girls went to bed hungry so she could stretch the little they had. Horror and anxiety rose in her as she spoke. She felt exposed, deeply disoriented by the idea that this powerful man was listening so intently. Dizziness returned, a wave of numbness, making her grip the back of a chair for balance. She had once been desperately poor, surviving on sheer will, and now a wealthy stranger offered attention that felt both like salvation and a terrifying unknown. Suspicion still lingered, but an overwhelming trust and attachment were beginning to burn inside her, intense and confusing, tearing at her heart. Lily watched with shining eyes, signing to Vinny with growing ease. "You came back again." Sophie remained wary, creating quiet tension in the room, but even she could not hide the flicker of curiosity. Vinny's inner turmoil deepened with every word Ellie shared. Remorse clawed at him relentlessly. While he navigated boardrooms and closed multi-million-dollar deals in heated offices with views of the skyline, Ellie endured humiliating poverty that no mother should face. The violent conflict inside him escalated, the ruthless man who had to protect his empire, versus the fatherly instinct screaming to shield this family. He felt an overwhelming surge of love for Lily, paternal and burning, that made every shadow in his past feel heavier. Before the conversation could deepen, further tension erupted outside. A black SUV from a rival faction cruised slowly down the narrow street, windows lowered just enough for a clear message. One of the men leaned out, voice carrying in the cold air. "Russo, you think you can start playing savior on our turf? These blocks belong to us. Keep coming around here and your little side projects are going to cost you." Vinny rose swiftly, stepping to the window. Another bold, unexpected street confrontation unfolded under the dim streetlights. Words were exchanged sharply across the distance. Accusations of overstepping territory veiled threats about complications for anyone associating with him. No violence broke out, but the air thickened with suspense. Vinny stood firm, his commanding presence clear even from inside the apartment. Inside his chest, the tearing grew more intense. Protecting Ellie and the girls meant drawing danger closer, yet abandoning them now felt like the greatest betrayal of the paternal bond already forming. Ellie watched in horror, pulling the girls behind her. Fear gripped her completely, mixed with heightened curiosity about this man who kept returning despite the risks. The absurdity of her situation stung bitterly. A powerless, impoverished mother suddenly caught in the orbit of a wealthy, powerful figure whose world brought both hope and new threats. Tears welled in her eyes as numbness spread. She felt deep disorientation, her inner world violently torn between gratitude for his protection and terror at what it might cost. When the rivals finally drove away with parting warnings, a heavy, condensed emotional stillness settled over the apartment. Vinny turned back, his face etched with strain. He spoke quietly. "I have resources. I can help with the bills, with warmer clothes, with medical care for Sophie. You do not have to carry this alone." Ellie's voice trembled, soft and polite. "Why, Mr. Russo, people like us, we are invisible to men like you. Suddenly being seen, it is confusing. It hurts in ways I cannot explain." Shock and curiosity warred inside her, creating a numbing psychological storm. She had endured so many unjust hardships, the system that ignored her pleas, the cold nights that left her daughters shivering, and now this powerful man offered a lifeline that felt almost too overwhelming to accept. Vinny's remorse burned hotter, a violent inner conflict that left him raw. He wanted nothing more than to become the protector Lily needed, the father figure fate had denied him until now. Yet every moment heightened his guilt. His dangerous life could shatter the fragile trust building here. In the quiet that followed, Lily approached Vinny and signed with simple, trusting movements. "You make us feel safe." Sophie watched silently, her guarded expression softening just a fraction. Vinny looked at Ellie, his voice low with the weight of his emotions. I am not a good man in every way, Elena, but for your daughters, for Lily, I want to try to do something right. The wind continued to howl outside, rattling the thin windows of the impoverished apartment. While inside, hidden truths were slowly being revealed, not just about Ellie's desperate struggles, but about the profound paternal bond forming between a powerful mafia boss and a vulnerable child who had finally been seen. The emotional tearing in every heart grew sharper, setting the stage for even greater storms ahead in the cold Chicago night. The following days in late October of 2025 brought sharper winds and colder nights to Chicago's South Side. Elena Harper moved through her routines like a shadow of herself, her thin body growing even more fragile under the weight of endless hardship. Each morning she rose before dawn, her fingers numb from the cold apartment where the space heater struggled against drafts that slipped through every crack. She was desperately impoverished, malnourished from skipping meals so Lily and Sophie could have something in their stomachs, and sleep-deprived from nights spent listening to the wind howl and worrying about the next eviction notice or unpaid bill. The humiliation cut deep, standing in long lines at the food pantry only to receive canned goods past their prime, watching other mothers with warmer coats and fuller shopping bags, knowing her daughters deserved better but having no power to give it to them. Every unreasonable injustice piled higher the school district, reducing her overtime hours without warning. The pharmacy refusing Sophie's medicine refill until the old balance was cleared, the landlord sliding another pink notice under, the door threatening disconnection of utilities by the end of the 5-week. One afternoon after finishing her bus route, Ellie returned home to find Lily and Sophie waiting with wide eyes. Vincent Russo's luxury sedan was parked outside again, its polished black surface gleaming under the weak sunlight like a symbol of a world far removed from theirs. Vinny stepped out, his fair-skinned face carrying the quiet authority of a man whose construction, empire, and real estate holdings commanded respect across the city. His tailored coat and confident stride only deepened the stark contrast, while Ellie endured humiliating poverty, shivering through wind-filled nights in threadbare clothes. Vinny lived in heated comfort with resources that could erase her struggles in a single decision. Inside the apartment, the air felt thick with tension. Ellie's voice was soft and timid as she greeted him. Mr. Russo, you keep coming back. I do not understand why. Vinny sat carefully on the worn couch, his powerful presence filling the small, pitiful space. His steel blue eyes moved from Ellie's exhausted face to Lily's hopeful expression and Sophie's guarded one. The paternal love he felt for Lily had grown into a burning, passionate force from the very first moment he had seen her signing for help. It was a fierce fatherly attachment that tore at him, violently clashing with the gnawing remorse that consumed him more each day. He had built wealth and power through shrewd deals and calculated risks, yet here was a destitute family enduring absurdly unfair suffering while he possessed the means to help. The inner conflict raged hotter. The ruthless mafia boss who needed to maintain control of his territory versus the man desperate to protect this child who had awakened something long buried in him. Remorse clawed deeper with every visit. How many times had his world ignored, or even contributed to the kind of poverty that left mothers like Ellie broken, and children like Lily unseen? Lily signed eagerly to him, her small hands moving with increasing trust. You came again. Will you stay longer today? Sophie, however, pulled back, her eyes narrowed with deep distrust. She signed sharply to Lily, her motions tense and warning. He brings danger. Powerful men always do. We should not get close. The quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed was heavy. Ellie felt a confusing swirl of fear and curiosity. Part of her wanted to push Vinny away to return to the painful familiarity of struggling alone. Another part, the desperate, powerless part, felt an overwhelming attachment growing intense and burning. Being suddenly seen and protected by a wealthy, powerful man left her in shock and deep disorientation. Dizziness washed over her. She steadied herself against the wall as numbness spread through her limbs. She had endured so many cold, humiliating nights, and now this man offered safety that felt both like a miracle and a terrifying risk. Vinny sensed the growing tension. He spoke gently, offering to cover the utility bill and bring groceries, everyday items that meant survival for them but pocket change for him. Ellie's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Her voice trembled, polite and hesitant. Why do you care about us, Mr. Russo? We have nothing to give back. This kind of kindness, it confuses me. It hurts inside. Before Vinny could answer, drama escalated sharply outside. The sound of car doors slamming echoed from the street. Members of the rival faction had returned bolder this time. 3 men approached the building entrance, their voices carrying clearly through the thin walls. "Russo, you think hiding behind a bus driver and her kids makes you untouchable? This block is ours. Keep showing up here and your little charity project is going to bring heat on everyone." Vinny rose immediately, his posture shifting into quiet command. Another tense, bold street confrontation unfolded just beyond the apartment door. The rivals pressed closer, words sharp and accusatory under the gray October sky. They questioned his presence in their territory, warned of complications for anyone associated with him, and made veiled threats about making life harder for those he tried to help. No physical violence erupted, but the suspense thickened the air, hearts pounding with the possibility of escalation. Vinny stood firm, his expensive coat whipping in the wind, projecting the power that had built his empire. Inside, however, the violent emotional conflict tore at him with greater intensity. Protecting Ellie and the girls meant drawing danger directly to their doorstep. His paternal love for Lily burned fiercely, yet the remorse was almost unbearable. Every shadow his world cast over this vulnerable family deepened his guilt and self-reproach. Ellie watched from the window, horror rising in her throat. She pulled Lily and Sophie close, her thin body trembling with anxiety and fear. The absurdity of the situation struck her like a blow. A destitute mother who could barely keep the lights on, suddenly caught in the crosscurrents of powerful men's conflicts. Tears slipped down her cheeks as numbness settled over her. She felt profound disorientation, her inner world violently torn between the growing trust and attachment to Vinny's protection and the terror that his presence might bring even greater hardship. Dizziness returned, a wave of pain and confusion, making her clutch the windowsill for balance. When the rivals finally drove away, after exchanging final sharp warnings, a heavy stillness returned to the apartment. Vinny re-entered, his face etched with strain. He looked at Ellie with eyes full of quiet torment. "I never wanted to bring danger to your door, but I cannot walk away from Lily, from all of you." Sophie's distrust deepened in that moment. She signed firmly to Lily, her small hands trembling with emotion. "See, he brings trouble. We were safer before he came." Lily looked between them, caught in silent conflict, her hopeful expression faltering for the first time. Ellie felt her heart tearing violently. The overwhelming attachment she felt toward Vinny's kindness warred with raw fear. She had been desperately poor for so long, enduring one unjust blow after another, and now this powerful man offered a lifeline that seemed to come with invisible chains. Her voice came out soft and breaking. "I am grateful, but I am also afraid. For my daughters, for what this might cost us." Vinny's remorse reached a new peak. The paternal love surging through him for Lily felt passionate and absolute, yet it clashed with the gnawing guilt of his dangerous life. He wanted to shield them completely, to become the father Lily clearly needed, but every confrontation reminded him how his power could harm as much as it protected. The inner storm left him raw, his wealthy exterior hiding a heart violently at war with itself. In the quiet, emotional stillness that followed, Lily stepped forward and signed to Vinny with gentle persistence. "You make me feel seen. Please do not leave." Sophie turned away, creating a painful layer of tension, while Ellie stood frozen, caught between gratitude and growing anxiety. Vinny looked at the small family, his voice low and heavy with emotion. "I will find a way to keep you safe. Whatever it takes." Outside, another rival vehicle cruised slowly past the building, a silent reminder that the conflicts on these streets were far from over. Inside the impoverished apartment, the escalating drama had deepened every emotional wound, suspicion and distrust, warring with burning attachment, remorse tearing at a powerful man's heart, and a destitute mother's world growing more confusing and painful with every passing hour. The wind continued to howl through the south side, carrying away the echoes of confrontation, but the inner tearing in every heart had only grown fiercer, setting the stage for revelations that would change everything. The cold October nights of 2025 grew harsher on Chicago's south side, each wind-filled evening stripping away another layer of Elena Harper's fragile strength. Ellie moved through her days like a ghost, her thin, malnourished body barely holding together under the relentless pressure of poverty. She had not eaten a full meal in days, giving every scrap to Lily and Sophie while she survived on black coffee and whatever leftovers she could find at the end of her bus routes. Sleep came in fitful bursts on the sagging couch, interrupted by the howling wind that rattled the thin windows and the constant fear of the next eviction notice or utility shutoff. The humiliation burned deep standing in the rain, at the food pantry only to be told supplies were low, watching her daughters shiver under threadbare blankets, knowing she was powerless to shield them from the cruel realities that no child should face. Absurdly unfair events continued to pile upon her. The school district suddenly cutting her hours without explanation, the pharmacy demanding full payment up front for Sophie's cough medicine, and the landlord posting yet another final warning on their door, threatening to change the pharmacy, demanding the service locks by the end of the week. One evening after another exhausting double shift, Ellie returned home to find Vincent Russo waiting outside the building once more. His sleek luxury sedan idled at the curb, its heated interior a world away from the freezing apartment upstairs. Vinny stood tall and commanding in his tailored wool coat, his fair-skinned face etched with quiet resolve. His wealth and power were impossible to ignore the man who closed multi-million-dollar construction deals and controlled vast real estate holdings in the city. Living in comfort, while Ellie endured nights of biting cold that left her, fingers numb, and her spirit bruised. Inside the dimly lit apartment, the air felt heavier than before. Lily's eyes lit up with trust as she signed to Vinny, her small hands moving with growing affection. Sophie remained guarded her distrust, creating a silent undercurrent of tension. Ellie's voice came out soft and timid when she greeted him. "Mr. Russo, you should not keep coming here. It is not safe for you. Or for us." Vinny's steel blue eyes held a storm of emotion. The paternal love he felt for Lily had become an all-consuming fire, passionate, protective, and burning intensely from the very first moment he had seen her signing desperately in the diner. It was a fatherly attachment that tore violently at his heart, clashing with the gnawing remorse that grew sharper with every visit. He had built an empire of wealth and influence, yet here was a destitute family suffering in ways that made his success feel hollow. The inner conflict raged hotter than ever, the powerful mafia boss who had to maintain control of his territory versus the man desperate to become the protector and father figure Lily so clearly needed. Remorse clawed at him relentlessly. Every shadow his dangerous world cast over this vulnerable family deepened his self-reproach and guilt. Before anyone could speak further, the crisis erupted without warning. Headlights swept across the narrow street as two black SUVs from the rival faction suddenly appeared, blocking the road in both directions. Doors opened and several men stepped out, their voices sharp and aggressive in the cold night air. "Russo, you have been warned too many times. This south side stretch is not yours to play savior in. Your little visits end tonight." The confrontation escalated rapidly into a life-threatening ambush. The rivals moved with bold intent surrounding the building entrance. Words flew fast and tense, accusations of territory violation, threats that anyone connected to Vinny would suffer consequences, and clear warnings that his charity had crossed a line. Vinny stepped outside, immediately positioning himself between the rivals and the apartment door. His commanding presence filled the street, but inside his chest a violent emotional storm raged. Protecting Ellie and the girls meant risking everything, yet abandoning them now felt like the ultimate betrayal of the burning paternal love he felt for Lily. The tearing in his heart grew almost unbearable remorse for bringing danger to their doorstep, mixed with fierce determination to shield them at any cost. Ellie watched in horror from the window, her body trembling with raw fear and anxiety. She pulled Lily and Sophie behind her, her thin arms shaking. The absurdity of the moment struck her like a physical blow. A powerless, impoverished mother who could barely keep food on the table, suddenly caught in the middle of powerful men's deadly games. Dizziness overwhelmed her. The world spun, numbness spreading through her limbs as shock and deep disorientation took hold. She felt pain in her chest, her inner world violently tearing apart between the overwhelming trust and attachment she had begun to feel toward Vinny, and the terror that his presence might destroy the fragile life she had fought so hard to maintain. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered softly, her voice breaking, "Please, not my girls." In the chaos of the ambush, one of the rivals made a sudden threatening move toward the building. Vinny reacted instantly, stepping forward to block the path. A brief, tense scuffle broke out. Not full violence, but enough to send hearts racing. Shouts echoed in the cold night, as Vinny used his powerful presence and sharp words to push the rivals back, protecting the entrance with his body. During the confrontation, a stray object thrown in the scuffle struck the window near where the girls stood, shattering glass and sending shards flying. Lily cried out in fear. Sophie clutched her friend tightly. Vinny took the brunt of the danger, positioning himself as a shield. A heavy blow glanced off his shoulder as he shoved one of the men back, but he did not fall. The rivals eventually retreated to their vehicles with final angry warnings, tires screeching as they sped away into the night, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with suspense and the promise of future threats. The street fell into an eerie, condensed emotional stillness. Vinny staggered back inside the apartment, his shoulder throbbing, but his face set with grim resolve. Blood seeped slowly from a cut on his arm, where glass or a glancing strike had caught him. He was wounded, yet his first concern was the girls. Ellie dropped to her knees beside him, horror and anxiety flooding her completely. Her hands shook as she pressed a thin towel to his wound, her voice soft and trembling with polite desperation. "Mr. Russo, you are hurt because of us. This is too much. I do not know what to do." Dizziness and numbness washed over her again in waves. She felt profound shock and confusion. A destitute woman who had endured so many cold, humiliating nights, suddenly being protected by a wealthy, powerful man who was now bleeding because of her family. The inner tearing was violent, overwhelming gratitude and burning attachment clashed with raw terror and guilt. She had been desperately poor for so long, and now this man's protection came at such a visible cost. Tears fell freely as she whispered, "Why would you risk yourself for people like us?" Lily and Sophie moved closer. Lily's small hands signed with trembling urgency, her eyes wide with fear and love. "You protected us. Are you okay, Sophie?" For the first time showed a crack in her distrust, her guarded expression softening into quiet concern as she helped Ellie hold the towel in place. Vinny looked at the three of them, his steel blue eyes filled with deep torment. The paternal love surging through him for Lily was fiercer than ever, passionate and absolute. Yet it clashed violently with the gnawing remorse that now threatened to consume him entirely. He had brought danger to their door. His empire of wealth and power, built on calculated risks and shadowed dealings, had endangered the very child who had awakened his long-buried fatherly instincts. The inner conflict tore at him with brutal force, the ruthless man who survived by staying detached versus the father who would bleed again and again to keep Lily safe. Remorse burned like fire in his chest as he gazed at Ellie's thin, exhausted face and the girl's frightened eyes. In the quiet stillness that followed the ambush, with the wind still howling outside and glass shards glittering on the floor, Vinny spoke quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I will not let them harm you. Whatever it costs, I will keep you safe." Ellie felt her heart shattering and mending in the same moment. The overwhelming attachment she felt toward this powerful man who kept risking everything for them left her in deep disorientation and emotional pain. She had endured so many unjust hardships alone, and now someone strong stood between her family and the cruel world. Yet the fear remained numbing and confusing, tearing violently at her soul. The night deepened around the impoverished apartment, the disparity between Vinny's wealth and their poverty never more stark. A wounded mafia boss sat bleeding in a freezing room, protected only by a thin towel and the small hands of two deaf girls, while a destitute mother knelt beside him, her inner world violently torn between terror and a burning, grateful trust that grew stronger with every shared breath. The crisis had passed for now, but the emotional wounds ran deeper than any physical injury, setting the stage for healing that would test every heart involved. In the quiet hours following the ambush on that cold October night in 2025, the Southside apartment felt smaller than ever, wrapped in a fragile stillness broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Elena Harper knelt beside Vincent Russo, her thin, trembling hands pressing a clean cloth against the wound on his arm. She was desperately impoverished, her malnourished body weak from days of little food and nights of restless cold sleep. The humiliation of her poverty weighed heavier in this moment. A destitute mother whose home offered no proper bandages, no warm blankets, nothing but threadbare towels and the faint smell of damp walls that had never kept out the Chicago winter. Her fingers were numb from the drafts that slipped through the cracks, and dizziness washed over her again as she worked, numbness spreading through her limbs while shock and deep disorientation clouded her thoughts. Vinny sat on the edge of the worn couch, his powerful frame still imposing even while injured. His fair-skinned face showed strain, but his steel-blue eyes remained fixed on Ellie and the two girls with quiet intensity. Blood had seeped through his expensive shirt, a stark reminder of the price his protection carried. The wealth that surrounded him in every other part of his life, heated luxury cars, private offices, and resources that could solve problems with a single phone call, stood in brutal contrast to this freezing bare apartment where a single mother and her daughters survived on sheer will. Lily and Sophie moved with surprising gentleness for children who had just faced danger. Lily's small hands worked carefully, helping her mother change the cloth, her curly hair falling across her focused face. Sophie, though still guarded, brought a bowl of clean water from the sink, her cough quieter now as concern overrode her distrust for a moment. The girls' innocent actions created a condensed emotional stillness in the room, a tender pocket of time amid the chaos. Ellie's voice was soft and timid, polite in the way someone speaks to someone older and far more powerful. "Mr. Russo, you are bleeding because of us. I am so sorry. Let me try to clean it properly." Her hands shook as she worked, horror and anxiety rising in waves. She felt profound guilt, mixed with an overwhelming, burning attachment that had grown fiercer since the first night in the diner. This powerful man had risked himself for her daughters, The idea left her in deep disorientation. A woman who had endured so many cold, humiliating nights, suddenly being protected by someone whose wealth could change everything yet whose presence brought new dangers. Tears slipped down her cheeks as numbness settled over her heart. She had been desperately poor for so long, and now this sudden care felt both like salvation and a painful reminder of everything she could not provide herself. Vinny watched the scene with violent inner conflict tearing at his soul. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned with passionate intensity, a fierce fatherly bond that had ignited the moment he saw her signing desperately for help and had only grown stronger. He wanted nothing more than to shield her, to become the father she had never had. Yet this love clashed brutally with the gnawing remorse that consumed him. His empire of construction deals and real estate holdings had brought him wealth and power, but it had also drawn danger straight to this vulnerable family. Every drop of blood on his arm deepened his self-reproach. How could a man like him, stained by the shadows of his world, dare to care so deeply for a child who deserved safety he might never fully guarantee? The emotional storm inside him grew more violent, a tearing that left him raw and silent for long moments. As the night deepened, the girls took turns helping. Lily signed simple, comforting words to Vinny, while gently holding the fresh cloth in place. "You are safe here with us." Sophie, her distrust, softening further in the face of his injury, brought an extra blanket thin and worn but offered with quiet sincerity. Their small, innocent kindness in the midst of his pain began to heal something deeper than the wound on his arm. Vinny felt the walls around his heart cracking. For years he had lived behind armor built from calculated risks and emotional distance. Now these two deaf girls living in poverty that made his success feel hollow were reaching him in ways no one else ever had. Ellie sat back for a moment, exhaustion and emotional turmoil washing over her. Another absurdly unfair event had struck earlier that day, a letter from the school district denying her request for emergency assistance, citing budget constraints while she knew wealthier families received help without question. The injustice. "We live like this every day. Cold nights, empty cupboards, fear that tomorrow will be worse. And yet you keep coming back. It confuses me. It makes my heart hurt in ways I cannot explain." Vinny's remorse deepened into something almost unbearable. He spoke quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "You owe me nothing, Elena. Seeing Lily, seeing all of you, it reminds me of everything I have missed in my own life. The choices I made to build my world have cost me more than I realized." The violent conflict inside him intensified the powerful mafia boss who needed to protect his empire versus the man whose paternal love for Lily demanded he become better, gentler, more present. He felt an overwhelming surge of protective affection, not romantic but deeply fatherly, that made every shadow in his past feel heavier. In the quiet hours that followed, the apartment fell into several moments of condensed emotional stillness. Lily curled up beside Vinny on the couch, her small hand resting lightly on his uninjured arm, as she signed stories about her day at school, simple tales of friends and lessons that carried the innocence he had long forgotten. Sophie watched from across the room, her guarded expression gradually easing as she saw how gently Vinny listened. Ellie prepared what little warm tea she could offer, her thin frame moving with the quiet dignity of a mother who had endured too much, yet still gave what she had. Another tense confrontation interrupted the peace near midnight. Headlights appeared again outside. A single car from the rival faction slowed past the building, the driver lowering the window just enough to call out a bold warning into the cold night. "Russo, this is not over. Keep playing protector here, and you will lose more than territory." The words hung in the air, escalating the suspense without physical violence. Vinny stood at the window, his wounded arm throbbing, his powerful presence a silent shield. The inner tearing grew fiercer remorse for endangering them, clashed with fierce determination to stay and protect. When the car finally drove away, the stillness returned deeper this time. Ellie knelt once more to check Vinny's wound, her hands gentler now. She felt a passionate, burning trust taking root despite her lingering fear. Being suddenly loved and protected by a wealthy, powerful man left her in extreme psychological shock. A destitute woman who had known only hardship, now experiencing care that felt almost overwhelming. Dizziness and numbness returned in waves, her inner world violently torn between gratitude and anxiety. Vinny looked at Lily, who had fallen asleep, leaning against him, and then at Ellie. His voice was low and filled with raw emotion. "Your daughters are healing something in me I thought was gone forever. I want to be the kind of man who deserves their trust, who deserves to protect them." Ellie's tears fell silently. Her soft voice trembled with polite vulnerability. "I am afraid, Mr. Russo, but I am also grateful." No one has ever stood between us and the world like this. The night stretched on the disparity between Vinny's wealth and their poverty, never more poignant. A powerful man sat wounded in a freezing apartment, allowing two small deaf girls to tend his injury with innocent kindness, while a destitute mother watched with a heart that was breaking open to trust. The emotional bond deepened in the quiet moments, healing wounds far deeper than the one on Vinny's arm, even as new threats loomed on the cold Chicago streets. The inner tearing in every heart had grown more intense, yet in that shared vulnerability, something tender and transformative was beginning to take root. A fatherly love, a mother's fragile hope, and two children's pure compassion, slowly mending what years of hardship and regret had broken. The gray light of another October morning in 2025 filtered weakly through the cracked windows of Elena Harper's Southside apartment, doing little to warm the freezing space. Ellie moved slowly, her thin, malnourished body aching from another sleepless night, spent tending to Vincent Russo's wound and worrying about what the new day would bring. She was desperately impoverished, her frame growing frailer with every skipped meal and every cold, wind-filled night that left her fingers numb and her spirit exhausted. The humiliation of her poverty felt endless. The food pantry that had run out of supplies before her turned the utility company's latest final notice, threatening disconnection within days, and the school's refusal to provide emergency aid for Sophie's worsening cough despite repeated pleas. Each unjust blow stripped her bare, leaving her feeling powerless and deeply ashamed that her daughters had to live this way. Vinny remained in the apartment, his wounded arm bandaged with what little they had. His fair-skinned face showed the strain of pain and exhaustion, yet his steel-blue eyes carried a quiet, commanding presence. His wealth and power stood in stark contrast to the bare surroundings. The man who could afford private doctors and heated penthouses, now sitting in a drafty room with peeling paint and a single flickering space heater. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned with fierce, passionate intensity, a fatherly bond that had taken root the moment he first saw her signing for help, and had only deepened through every shared moment of vulnerability. Yet this love clashed violently with the gnawing remorse that tormented him more each hour. His empire of construction and real estate had brought him success, but it had also invited danger into this family's fragile life. The inner tearing grew sharper, the powerful mafia boss who needed to protect his territory versus the man whose heart ached to become the father Lily deserved. Lily sat close to Vinny, her curly hair tousled, signing gentle stories to distract him from the pain. Sophie watched from the corner, her distrust still present but softening into quiet curiosity as she saw how patiently Vinny listened to the girls. Ellie's voice remained soft and timid when she spoke to him. "Mr. Russo, you should see a real doctor. Staying here, it is not right for a man like you." Before Vinny could respond, another absurdly unfair event struck. A loud knock echoed at the door. The landlord stood outside with two officials delivering yet another eviction warning, this time citing unpaid rent and disturbances from the previous night's confrontation. The man's cold words cut deep as he handed Ellie the papers. "You have 1 week. No more extensions." Ellie felt horror rise in her throat. Dizziness overwhelmed her. The world tilted as numbness spread through her body. She clutched the doorframe for balance shock and deep disorientation flooding her. Being suddenly protected and cared for by a wealthy, powerful man only made the humiliation sharper. She had endured so many cold nights alone, and now even that small shelter was being threatened while Vinny watched. Vinny rose despite his injury, his commanding presence filling the doorway. A tense, bold street confrontation unfolded on the sidewalk as the landlord and officials argued with him about outside interference. Rival eyes watched from a distance. Another car from the opposing faction slowed past the driver, lowering the window to deliver a sharp warning. "Russo, your involvement is making things worse for everyone on this block. Back off or the pressure increases." The exchange remained verbal but heavy, with threat heightening the suspense, as Vinny stood firm, shielding Ellie from the worst of the confrontation. Inside his chest, the violent emotional conflict tore harder. Remorse for bringing this added pressure clashed with fierce determination to protect the family that had begun healing his own wounds. When the officials finally left, a heavy, condensed emotional stillness settled over the apartment. Ellie sank onto the couch, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Her voice trembled with polite vulnerability. "Everything is falling apart, and you are here risking yourself again. I do not know how to feel anymore. It confuses me. It hurts so much inside." Lily and Sophie exchanged glances. Then Sophie, who had remained the most guarded, reached under the old couch and pulled out a small, worn object, an old camcorder, a sentimental keepsake passed down from her late grandfather. Her hands shook slightly as she held it up. In a moment of shocking revelation, she signed to Lily and then turned to Vinny and Ellie. Sophie had secretly recorded the rival faction's earlier threats, and more importantly, a conversation she had overheard near the community center, where city officials connected to the rivals discussed cutting funds meant for poor and deaf children, including plans that would have harmed programs Ellie relied on for support. The camcorder's footage showed clear evidence of corruption and exploitation, including voices admitting to skimming resources while families like Ellie's suffered. This was the second shocking twist. Sophie, the distrustful best friend, had captured proof that not only validated Ellie's struggles but also exposed how larger forces had contributed to their misery. The room fell into profound silence. Ellie stared at the camcorder in shock, her body swaying with dizziness and numbness. The revelation left her in extreme psychological disorientation. A destitute woman who had endured humiliating poverty, suddenly seeing proof that her suffering was not just bad luck, but the result of deliberate neglect and greed. Tears flowed freely as violent inner turmoil tore through her. She had been powerless for so long, and now this small, innocent child had provided a weapon of truth. The overwhelming trust and attachment she felt toward Vinny burned even hotter, mixed with gratitude and a painful awareness of how close they had come to losing everything. Vinny took the camcorder with careful hands, his steel blue eyes widening as he watched the footage on the small screen. The evidence was damning, and far more shocking than anyone expected. His remorse reached a new violent peak. While he had built wealth through his own empire, others in positions of power had exploited the vulnerable, leaving families like Ellie's to freeze and starve. The paternal love surging through him for Lily felt more passionate and protective than ever. This child and her friend had not only healed him but now handed him a tool to fight for them. Yet the inner conflict raged brutally. Using this evidence could escalate the danger from the rivals, yet ignoring it would betray the trust the girls had placed in him. Remorse tore at him like never before. A powerful man suddenly confronted with how his world and the wider system had failed the innocent. In the quiet, emotional stillness that followed the revelation, Lily signed softly to Vinny. Sophie kept it safe. She wanted to help too. Sophie looked down, her guarded walls cracking further as she signed for the first time directly toward Vinny. "I thought you were like the others, but you stayed when it hurt." Ellie reached out and gently touched Sophie's shoulder, her voice breaking with soft politeness. "You are so brave, sweetheart. All of you. I do not deserve this kindness." She felt profound shock and confusion, her inner world violently torn between overwhelming gratitude and lingering fear. Being suddenly loved and protected by a wealthy, powerful man, while holding such explosive evidence, left her numb and disoriented, tears falling as the weight of years of unjust suffering pressed down. Another tense confrontation interrupted the moment. A rival vehicle cruised past slowly, the occupants calling out a bold warning from the street. "Russo, whatever you think you have, it will not save you or them. Stay out of our business." Vinny stepped to the window, his wounded arm throbbing, his presence a silent shield once more. The suspense thickened the air, but he did not back down. When the car disappeared, Vinny turned back to the small family, his voice low and heavy with emotion. "This evidence changes things. I will use it carefully. To protect you. All of you. I cannot change the past, but I refuse to let this continue." Ellie looked at him, her heart aching with a burning, passionate trust that now felt unbreakable. The disparity between Vinny's wealth and their poverty had never felt more profound. A powerful man willing to risk his empire for a destitute family that had nothing but love and courage to offer in return. In the quiet that followed, with the old camcorder resting on the table like a beacon of unexpected hope, the emotional bond deepened further. Lily leaned against Vinny. Sophie's distrust continued to melt, and Ellie felt her inner world shifting from fear toward a fragile but growing sense of safety. The second shocking twist had not only exposed corruption, but had also forged an even stronger connection, one where a mafia boss's remorse-driven protection met the innocent kindness of two vulnerable girls and their resilient mother. The wind continued to howl outside, but inside the impoverished apartment something transformative was taking hold, healing through truth, trust, and the quiet power of being truly seen. The chill of late October in 2025 clung to Chicago's South Side like an unrelenting shadow, turning every breath into a visible mist. Elena Harper stood in the doorway of her freezing apartment, clutching the old camcorder evidence in her thin, trembling hands. She was desperately impoverished, her malnourished frame so frail that the slightest wind made her sway. Nights of biting cold and sleep deprivation had left dark circles under her eyes and a constant ache in her bones. The humiliation burned deeper than ever. Another eviction notice had arrived that morning, the landlord's harsh words still echoing, "One more disturbance, and you are out." Absurdly unfair events kept piling on the city office, denying her emergency housing aid while approving grants for wealthier neighborhoods, the pharmacy once again refusing Sophie's medicine without full upfront payment, and the school district cutting her already meager bus driver hours without notice. Ellie felt utterly powerless, a destitute mother stripped of every dignity, enduring one crushing blow after another, while trying to shield her daughters from the world's cruelty. Vincent Russo plied her. His wounded arm still bandaged his fair-skinned face set with grim determination. His tailored coat and commanding presence filled the small, pitiful space, a vivid reminder of the vast gulf between his world of multi-million-dollar construction deals and real estate empires and Ellie's reality of threadbare common estate posts, blankets, and empty cupboards. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned with fierce, passionate intensity, a deep fatherly bond that had ignited the first night in the diner and now consumed him. Yet this love clashed violently with the gnawing remorse that tore at his heart. His power and wealth had brought danger to this family's door, and every new threat deepened his self-reproach. The inner conflict raged hotter than ever, the ruthless mafia boss who had to maintain control, versus the man desperate to become the protector and father Lily so clearly needed. Lily and Sophie stood close, their small faces pale but determined. The camcorder evidence Sophie had bravely captured now rested in Vinny's hands, proof of corruption that could change everything. The climactic confrontation had been arranged in a neutral location, a quiet community center meeting room on the edge of the south side, away from rival eyes but still within reach of danger. Vinny had called the meeting with the rival faction's key figure, using the evidence as leverage, while demanding they cease all threats against Ellie and the girls. Ellie had insisted on coming, her voice soft and timid when she spoke to Vinny earlier. "I cannot hide anymore. If this is for my daughters, I need to stand there too." As they arrived, tension thickened the air. The rival leader and two associates waited inside, their postures aggressive. The moment Vinny, Ellie, and the girls entered, sharp words began flying. "Russo, you have no right bringing outsiders into our business. This evidence means nothing. Back off our territory or things get worse for your little charity case." The drama escalated rapidly. Voices rose in a tense, bold confrontation. The rivals accused Vinny of overstepping, threatened to make life impossible for anyone associated with him, and mocked Ellie's poverty openly. "Look at her, thin as a rail, living in that rat hole. You think playing hero changes anything?" Ellie felt horror surge through her. Dizziness overwhelmed her. She gripped Vinny's uninjured arm for balance as numbness spread and deep disorientation clouded her mind. Being suddenly protected by a wealthy, powerful man, while her utter misery was thrown in her face, left her in extreme psychological shock. Tears pricked her eyes as violent inner torment tore at her. Overwhelming trust and attachment to Vinny clashed with raw fear and humiliation. She had endured so many cold, wind-filled nights alone, and now her suffering was being used as a weapon against the man trying to help her. Vinny's voice remained controlled but carried steel. "This ends today. The footage shows your involvement in skimming funds meant for children like Lily and Sophie. Leave this family alone." The rivals laughed coldly, escalating the confrontation with bolder threats. One stepped closer, voice low and menacing. "You keep pushing, Russo, and we will make sure the whole South Side knows what happens to those who interfere." Another tense street confrontation spilled outside when the meeting moved toward the parking lot. A rival vehicle pulled up unexpectedly, blocking the exit. Sharp words were exchanged under the gray October sky, accusations, warnings, and clear threats that any further action would bring severe consequences. No physical blows were thrown, but the suspense was suffocating. Vinny positioned himself protectively in front of Ellie and the girls, his powerful presence a shield. Inside his chest, the violent emotional conflict reached new heights. Remorse clawed at him relentlessly. His world had endangered them, yet walking away now felt impossible. The paternal love surging through him for Lily was passionate and absolute, making every threat feel like a personal failure. He felt torn apart, the man who had built an empire through calculated power, versus the father whose heart demanded he risk everything for this child. Ellie watched in horror and anxiety, her thin body shaking. She pulled Lily and Sophie closer, her voice breaking in a soft, polite whisper. "Please, enough. My girls have suffered enough." The absurdity of the moment struck her violently. A destitute, powerless mother standing in the middle of powerful men's conflict, her poverty mocked while a wealthy man fought for her. Shock and confusion left her numb and dizzy, her inner world tearing apart between burning gratitude and overwhelming fear. She had once been so guarded and suspicious, and now the attachment she felt toward Vinny burned intensely, leaving her emotionally raw. In the height of the confrontation, Lily stepped forward bravely. Her small hands moved with clear, determined signs that Vinny voiced for the others. "You hurt my mom. You hurt us." "Stop." Sophie, no longer fully distrustful, stood beside her friend, adding her own quiet signing support. The rivals faltered for a moment, caught off guard by the children's courage. Vinny used the moment to press the advantage, revealing more of the camcorder evidence. The rivals' faces hardened, but the pressure mounted. Another unexpected rival car arrived, escalating the drama further with sharp verbal warnings from the street. "This is your last chance, Russo. Walk away now." The tension peaked in a heavy, condensed emotional stillness as the rivals finally backed down, retreating to their vehicles with parting threats that hung in the cold air like ice. "This is not over." When the vehicles disappeared, Ellie's knees buckled. She sank against Vinny, tears flowing freely. Dizziness and pain washed over her in waves. She felt profound shock and deep disorientation, a woman who had known only hardship, suddenly protected so fiercely by a powerful man. Her voice trembled softly. "You stood up for us, even when it put you in danger. I do not know how to thank you. It hurts inside. This feeling of being seen after so long." Vinny held her steady, his own heart tearing violently. The paternal love he felt for Lily, and by extension for this entire fragile family, burned with overwhelming intensity. Yet the remorse was almost unbearable. His wealth and power had both saved and endangered them. The inner conflict left him raw. The mafia boss who survived by staying detached, versus the man whose fatherly instincts demanded he choose compassion over empire. In the quiet aftermath, as they returned to the car, Lily signed to Vinny with shining eyes. "You protected us like a dad would." Sophie nodded slowly, her remaining distrust nearly gone. Ellie looked at Vinny, her soft voice filled with emotion. "I was so afraid. But you made me feel safe, even for a little while." The confrontation had ended, but the emotional wounds ran deep. The disparity between Vinny's wealth and Ellie's poverty had never felt more profound. A powerful man risking everything for a destitute family that had nothing but courage and love to offer. The inner tearing in every heart had grown fiercer, yet in that shared moment of survival, the bond between them had become unbreakable. The cold wind continued to blow through the south side streets, but for the first time a fragile hope flickered amid the storm, a hope born from courage, evidence, and the quiet transformative power of being truly protected and seen. The late October days of 2025 faded into colder evenings on Chicago's South Side, each wind-filled night pressing harder against the thin walls of Elena Harper's apartment. Ellie sat on the edge of the sagging couch, her thin, malnourished body trembling from exhaustion and the constant chill that seeped through every crack. She had not slept properly in days, surviving on scraps so Lily and Sophie could eat. The humiliation of her poverty felt crushing. Another eviction notice had been taped to the door that morning, the landlord's cold words still ringing. "This is your final warning." Unreasonable and unjust events continued without mercy. The city welfare office rejecting her latest appeal for emergency assistance, the school denying extra support for deaf students while approving funds for other programs, and the pharmacy once again refusing Sophie's medicine until the growing balance was paid in full. Ellie felt desperately powerless, a destitute mother stripped of every safety net, enduring one humiliating blow after another, while her daughters shivered under thin blankets. Vincent Russo stood by the window, his wounded arm still bandaged, his fair-skinned face etched with deep strain. His tailored coat and commanding presence filled the small, pitiful space, highlighting the vast disparity between his world of wealth and power, multi-million-dollar construction projects and real estate holdings, and Ellie's reality of freezing nights and empty cupboards. The paternal love he felt for Lily had become an all-consuming fire, passionate and fiercely protective from the very first moment he had seen her signing desperately in the diner. This fatherly bond now burned so intensely that it threatened to overwhelm everything else in his life. Lily sat close to him, her curly hair framing her hopeful face as she signed quietly. Sophie watched from the side, her earlier distrust almost entirely replaced by quiet trust. Ellie's voice came out soft and timid when she spoke. "Mr. Russo, after everything that happened yesterday, I do not know what comes next. I am afraid for my girls." Before Vinny could answer, another absurdly unfair blow landed. A city inspector arrived unexpectedly with 2 officials citing code violations in the building and demanding immediate repairs that Ellie could never afford. The inspector's harsh tone cut deep as he listed fines and deadlines. Ellie felt horror rise in her throat. Dizziness overwhelmed her. The world spun as numbness spread through her limbs and deep disorientation clouded her mind. She clutched the back of a chair for balance, shock and pain tearing through her. Being suddenly protected by a wealthy, powerful man only made the humiliation sharper. She had endured so many cold, wind-filled nights alone. And now, even the small shelter she had fought to keep was being threatened while Vinny watched. Vinny stepped forward, his commanding voice calm but firm. The confrontation escalated into a tense, bold exchange on the sidewalk. The officials pressed their demands while a rival car cruised past slowly, the driver lowering the window to deliver another sharp warning. Russo, your interference is causing problems for everyone. Keep pushing, and the pressure on this block increases. Words flew back and forth under the gray sky, accusations of outside meddling, veiled threats, and clear messages that Vinny's involvement was making life harder for the very people he tried to help. No violence broke out, but the suspense hung heavy in the cold air. Vinny stood firm, shielding Ellie and the girls with his presence. Inside his chest, the violent emotional conflict tore at him with brutal force. Remorse clawed deeper than ever. His power had both saved and endangered them. The paternal love surging through him for Lily felt more passionate and absolute, yet it clashed violently with the gnawing guilt that he might never be able to fully protect them from his world. When the officials and the rival car finally departed, a heavy, condensed emotional stillness settled over the apartment. Ellie sank onto the couch, tears flowing silently. Her voice trembled with polite vulnerability. Everything keeps getting worse, and you keep standing between us and the world. I do not know how to carry this anymore. It confuses me. It hurts so deeply inside. Lily moved closer to Vinny, her small hands signing with quiet urgency. In a moment that shattered the air, she looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes and signed words that carried devastating weight. I was always waiting for my dad to see me. The room fell into profound silence. Vinny froze, his steel blue eyes widening in shock. The DNA results he had quietly arranged after the first medical check on Lily, results he had received only hours earlier, confirmed what the little girl's innocent words now made undeniable. Lily was his biological daughter, born from a brief connection with Ellie years ago, long before he had fully descended into the shadowed life that built his empire. This was the shocking truth he had suspected, but never fully faced until now. Extreme psychological shock ripped through Vinny. His powerful frame trembled as violent inner conflict tore his heart apart. The paternal love he had felt from the very first moment exploded into something overwhelming and absolute, a fierce, burning, fatherly bond that now carried the weight of blood. Yet this revelation clashed brutally with the gnawing remorse that consumed him. He had unknowingly abandoned his own child to a life of desperate poverty, cold nights, and humiliating struggle while he lived in luxury and power. The inner tearing grew almost unbearable. The ruthless mafia boss who had built success through calculated detachment versus the father who now realized he had failed the one person who needed him most. Tears burned in his eyes for the first time in decades as remorse violently tore at his soul. Ellie stared at him, her thin body swaying with dizziness and numbness. Shock and deep disorientation flooded her. She had carried this secret alone for years, never imagining the powerful man who kept returning could be Lily's father. Her inner world shattered and reformed in the same moment. Overwhelming trust and passionate attachment to Vinny, now mixed with profound confusion and fear. She had been desperately poor, enduring one unjust hardship after another, and now the man protecting them was revealed as the father of her child. Her voice came out in a soft, trembling whisper. Lily, she is yours. I never thought you would find out like this. I am sorry. I was so alone. The emotional stillness that followed was heavy and sacred. Lily reached out and took Vinny's hand, signing simply, "You are here now." That is what matters. Sophie watched with wide eyes, her remaining walls fully dissolved, offering silent support. Vinny dropped to one knee despite his injury, bringing himself to Lily's level. His voice was thick with raw emotion as he signed the words he had been learning and spoke them aloud. I did not know, but from the moment I saw you in that diner, something inside me knew. You are my daughter, and I accept you completely, as my blood, as my family. I will protect you and raise you as my own no matter what it costs. The paternal awakening hit him with overwhelming force. Remorse for the years lost clashed violently with the fierce burning love now flooding his heart. He had spent his life building power and wealth, yet nothing compared to this moment of accepting Lily as his child. The inner torment reached its peak, a violent tearing between the man he had been and the father he now chose to become. Ellie watched tears streaming down her face. She felt profound shock and a passionate, intense attachment that left her numb and disoriented. Being suddenly loved and protected by this powerful man, who was also the father of her daughter, created an emotional storm that tore at her soul. Her soft voice broke as she whispered, "After everything, you still choose us." Another tense confrontation interrupted the moment when a rival vehicle slowed past the building, the occupants calling out a final bold warning from the street. "Russo, whatever you think you have found here, it will not save you from the consequences." Vinny stood at the window, his presence a silent shield, the inner conflict raging as fiercely as ever. When the car disappeared, Vinny turned back to the family. He looked at Lily with eyes full of tears and quiet resolve. "You are my daughter. I will raise you. I will protect you. From this moment on, you are no longer alone." In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed, Lily leaned into his embrace, signing softly, "I knew you would see me one day." Ellie knelt beside them, her heart violently torn between fear of the future and overwhelming gratitude. The disparity between Vinny's wealth and their poverty had never felt more profound yet in this moment. Something far greater than money had bridged the gap, a father's awakening and a bond sealed in blood and kindness. The wind continued to howl outside, but inside the impoverished apartment a powerful transformation had taken place. A once ruthless mafia boss had fully accepted his daughter, choosing fatherhood over shadows, while a destitute mother and two vulnerable girls found the protection and love they had longed for. The inner tearing remained intense, but for the first time, it carried the promise of healing. The final days of October in 2025 brought a brief, fragile calm to Chicago's South Side, though the wind still carried the sharp promise of winter. Elena Harper stood in the doorway of her freezing apartment, watching Vincent Russo make quiet arrangements on his phone. She remained desperately impoverished, her thin, malnourished body weakened by weeks of scarce meals and sleepless nights, filled with the howl of cold wind through cracked windows. The humiliation of her poverty felt unending. Another utility shut-off notice had arrived that morning. The landlord had posted a final eviction warning on the building bulletin board for all to see, and the school district had once again denied her request for emergency aid for deaf students, while approving funds for less needy programs. Each unjust event stripped her further, leaving her feeling powerless and deeply ashamed that her daughters had to witness such constant struggle. Vinny moved with purposeful calm, his fair-skinned face showing the weight of recent days. His tailored coat and commanding presence filled the small, pitiful space, emphasizing the vast disparity between his world of wealth and power. Successful construction empires and real estate holdings that generated millions in Ellie's reality of bare cupboards and threadbare blankets. The paternal love he felt for Lily had transformed into something absolute and burning, a fierce fatherly bond that now carried the knowledge that she was his biological daughter. This love clashed violently with the gnawing remorse that tormented him more intensely than ever. He had unknowingly left his own child to endure humiliating poverty while he lived in comfort and influence. The inner conflict raged hotter. The powerful mafia boss who had built success through shadowed dealings versus the father who now chose to dismantle parts of that world to protect his daughter and her family. Lily and Sophie stayed close to Vinny, their small hands occasionally signing gentle encouragement. Ellie's voice was soft and timid when she spoke. "Mr. Russo, after everything you have done, after learning the truth about Lily, I still feel lost. I do not know how to accept this kind of help." Before Vinny could respond, drama escalated once more. A city inspector arrived with two officials citing new code violations and demanding immediate payment of fines that Ellie could never afford. The inspector's harsh tone exposed her misery openly. "This building is not suitable for children. You have 48 hours to address the issues or face removal." Ellie felt horror surge through her. Dizziness overwhelmed her. The world tilted as numbness spread through her limbs, and deep disorientation took hold. She clutched Vinny's arm for balance, shock and pain tearing at her heart. Being suddenly protected and loved by a wealthy, powerful man, while her utter poverty and powerlessness were laid bare, left her in extreme psychological shock. Tears welled as violent inner torment ripped through her overwhelming trust, and passionate attachment to Vinny clashed with raw fear and humiliation. She had endured so many cold, wind-filled nights alone, and now even the small shelter she clung to was being threatened in front of the man who had become her daughter's father. Vinny stepped forward immediately. The confrontation spilled onto the sidewalk in a tense, bold exchange. The officials pressed their demands while a rival vehicle cruised past slowly, the occupants lowering the window to deliver another sharp warning. "Russo, your involvement here is causing ripples. Keep interfering, and the pressure on this neighborhood will only grow." Words flew back and forth under the gray sky. Accusations of meddling veiled threats, and clear messages that Vinny's protection was making life harder for everyone on the block. Vinny stood firm, his commanding presence shielding Ellie and the girls. Inside his chest, the violent emotional conflict tore at him with greater force. Remorse burned like fire, his power had both saved and complicated their lives. The paternal love for Lily felt more passionate and protective than ever. Yet it clashed brutally with the guilt of endangering the family he now claimed as his own. When the officials and the rival car finally departed, a heavy, condensed emotional stillness returned to the apartment. Ellie sank onto the couch, tears flowing freely. Her soft voice trembled with polite vulnerability. "Everything keeps breaking around us, and you keep standing in the way of the worst of it. I was so desperate and alone for so long. Now this protection, it confuses me. It makes my heart ache with feelings I cannot name." Vinny looked at her, his steel blue eyes filled with deep torment. "I am dismantling parts of my old world, Elena, using my resources to create something better. I have spoken with city contacts and used the evidence Sophie provided. A new community center for deaf and at-risk children is being funded, one that will actually help families like yours. You will have a role there if you want it. Transportation, family support, whatever you need. No more struggling alone." The revelation left Ellie in profound shock. Dizziness and numbness washed over her again. She had been desperately poor, enduring one unjust hardship after another, and now this powerful man was offering not just temporary help, but a lasting legacy. The overwhelming trust and attachment she felt toward him burned intensely, creating a passionate, emotional upheaval that left her disoriented and tearful. Her voice came out in a soft whisper. "After everything, you are building something real. For Lily. For all of us." In the quiet moments that followed, Vinny began making calls and arrangements. He used his wealth openly now, arranging immediate payment of all outstanding bills, securing warmer clothing and proper medical care for Sophie, and ensuring the apartment was made safe and heated while the larger plans moved forward. Each act highlighted the stark contrast. Vinny's resources could erase years of Ellie's suffering in days while she had fought alone for so long. Another tense confrontation interrupted the peace when a rival faction vehicle appeared on the street. The driver slowed and called out a bold warning. "Russo, turning soft like this will cost you everything. Walk away from this charity and return to business as usual." Vinny stepped outside his presence, calm but unyielding. Sharp words were exchanged in another suspense-filled street standoff, but he did not yield. The inner tearing in his heart grew fiercer. Remorse for the life he had led clashed violently with the fatherly determination to build something good for his daughter. He rejected a major deal on the spot, choosing compassion over profit, and the rival drove away with a final threat. When the car disappeared, Sophie approached Vinny for the first time without hesitation. She signed clearly, her voice of distrust fully replaced by gratitude. "You chose us instead of the easy way." "Thank you." Lily leaned against her father, signing with bright eyes. "We are a family now." Ellie watched the scene, her thin frame still trembling from exhaustion and emotion. She felt a burning, passionate attachment to the man who had become Lily's father and their protector. The mindset of someone who had once been desperately poor and was now suddenly loved and protected by a wealthy, powerful man left her in deep emotional upheaval. Gratitude mixed with lingering fear, joy mixed with the pain of years lost. Her soft voice carried quiet wonder. "I never imagined someone like you would choose kindness for people like us." Vinny looked at the small family, his remorse still gnawing, but now balanced by purpose. "This community center will be named in honor of the strength I have seen here. It will provide real support, education, medical help, transportation, and a safe place for children like Lily and Sophie. You, Elena, will help lead the family programs. No more cold nights, no more powerlessness." In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed, with the wind still whispering outside, Vinny gathered them close. The disparity between his wealth and their former poverty had never been clearer, yet kindness had begun to bridge it. Redemption was unfolding not through power alone, but through the innocent compassion of two little girls and the resilient heart of their mother. The inner tearing remained intense in every heart, but it now carried hope. A powerful man was choosing to build a new legacy. A destitute mother was stepping into safety and purpose. And two vulnerable children were watching their father and protector create a future they had never dared to dream of. The cold October wind continued to blow, but inside the apartment, the seeds of a transformed life had taken firm root, a life built on redemption, kindness, and the unbreakable bond of family. The last days of October in 2025 wrapped Chicago's South Side in a final biting chill, yet inside the once freezing apartment, a quiet warmth had begun to take root. Elena Harper stood near the window, her thin, malnourished body still showing the marks of long deprivation, cheeks hollow from too many missed meals, eyes heavy from countless sleepless nights, enduring the howl of cold wind through cracked walls. She remained a picture of deeply pitiful poverty, a destitute American mother who had known only powerlessness, humiliation, and the sting of unjust systems that seemed determined to keep her family broken. Another eviction threat had arrived that very morning, the landlord's final notice posted publicly for neighbors to see, while the utility company threatened disconnection within hours. These absurdly unfair events continued to expose her utter misery, tearing violently at her inner world even as protection surrounded her. Vincent Russo moved with steady purpose, his fair-skinned face reflecting the depth of his emotional journey. His tailored coat and commanding presence spoke of immense wealth and power, a man whose construction, empire, and real estate holdings commanded respect across the city. Yet in this humble space, his focus was entirely on the small family before him. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned with passionate, intense force, a fierce fatherly bond that had ignited the first moment he saw her signing desperately in the diner, and had only grown stronger through every trial. This love created a compelling focal point of emotional upheaval, clashing violently with the gnawing remorse that still tormented him. He had unknowingly left his own daughter to suffer in poverty while he lived in luxury. The inner tearing grew increasingly intense, the powerful mafia boss who had built success through shadowed choices, versus the father who now chose humanity over everything else. Remorse and love tore at his heart in equal measure, leaving him raw yet resolved. Lily and Sophie stayed close, their small hands occasionally signing words of comfort. Ellie's voice remained soft and timid when she addressed Vinny. After everything, the cold nights, the hunger, the fear, I still feel confused sometimes. But your presence, it brings something I never knew I needed. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed, Vinny gathered them near. He had used his resources to secure the apartment, pay every outstanding bill, and begin construction on a new community center dedicated to deaf and at-risk children. The center would offer real support, transportation programs, family counseling, educational resources, and medical care, all funded through his legitimate businesses as he stepped away from riskier dealings. Ellie would lead family support efforts, finding purpose beyond endless struggle. Yet even in this moment of hope, another unreasonable injustice struck when a final rival warning arrived via a tense street confrontation outside. A vehicle slowed and sharp words carried through the cold air. Russo, choosing this path will cost you alliances. Think carefully. Vinny stood firm, his presence, a shield exchanging calm but resolute replies that heightened suspense without violence. The inner conflict raged inside him, remorse for past choices clashing with the fierce determination to build something good for his daughter. As the rival car departed, a profound stillness settled. Lily looked up at Vinny and signed with shining eyes. You are my dad now. We are safe. Sophie nodded, adding her own gentle signs of gratitude. Ellie felt overwhelming emotions surge through her. From initial suspicion to this passionate, burning attachment, she experienced deep disorientation and numbness. Her heart violently torn between the memory of desperate poverty and the reality of being protected by a wealthy, powerful man who had chosen fatherhood. Dizziness and pain washed over her as tears fell. She had endured so many humiliating nights of cold wind and hunger, yet love, regardless of skin color or the divide between wealth and poverty, had proven stronger than any barrier. Compassion had bridged the gap, showing that true connection transcended money and status. Vinny knelt before Lily, his voice thick with emotion. You taught me what matters most. I accept you fully as my daughter. I will raise you, protect you, and build a life where you never have to feel invisible again. We are family now. The moment carried immense humanistic value, a lesson in how one small act of noticing someone overlooked can spark redemption and healing. It offered knowledge that kindness has the power to transform even the hardest hearts. This education in compassion reminded everyone that love knows no boundaries of background or circumstance. Through this experience came the valuable lesson that true strength lies in choosing humanity over power. It provided knowledge that genuine connection can heal wounds created by years of struggle. Such moments deliver an important education in empathy, showing how one person's courage can ripple outward. The story carried the lesson that wealth and poverty cannot separate love and compassion when hearts remain open. In the quiet that followed, Vinny looked at Ellie with deep respect. You raised her with such strength despite everything. Thank you for giving me this chance to be the father she deserves. Ellie's soft voice trembled with grateful tears. I never imagined this path, but seeing you choose us, it teaches something beautiful about what family can become. As the community center plans moved forward, the family stood together in a moment of condensed emotional stillness. The center would not only provide practical support but also serve as a living reminder of how one act of kindness noticing a child in need can create lasting change. This narrative offered knowledge that every small gesture matters. It delivered the lesson that redemption is possible when we choose compassion. Such stories provide valuable education in resilience and hope. They bring the important lesson that love transcends all divisions. Through this tale came the knowledge that true legacy is built on kindness rather than power alone. I wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with others so you can enjoy many engaging videos every day. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? How does it connect to your own real-life experiences? I truly want to listen to the emotions from deep within your heart, so please share your thoughts below. Thank you for watching. Goodbye for now, and I promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.